So Giselle is the founder and director of SOS International, is a licensed midwife, a member of the European Association of Body Psychotherapy, a somatic experiencing practitioner, and founding secretary of the European Association for Somatic Experiencing. Giselle combines her training as a somatic therapist with the art of midwifery, the core principles of SE, and her widespread cross-cultural experiences. She works internationally, is multilingual, and was a member of the trauma outreach teams in Southeast India post and South Africa post-independence. Giselle brought Peter Levine's Waking the Tiger SE trainings to England and France and teaches workshops related to traumatic stress worldwide. She specializes in working with PTSD and early childhood disorders, like combat and high-stress situations and international disasters. You can learn more about Giselle's work at www.sosinternational.org. So, Giselle, whenever you're ready, let's get started. I'm really excited.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. I wonder who wrote that introduction. Doesn't sound like me at all, but thank you. And congratulations for this wonderful work that you are doing. And I wanted to, also I feel, wow, when you first asked me to do this, I thought introduction to SE. Yeah, that's usually 2 days. Yeah, it's 3-year training. 2 days gives a taster of it. And then you told me it was 2 hours. And I went, whoa. How am I going to be able to distill 21 years of passion and a lot more of my life experiences into 2 hours? So everyone, I hope you'll bear with me as I shall do my very best to try and share with you a little bit of why I think this work, this working with trauma, this work and why I love SE. I hope I'll be able to do that in this short period of time. So to begin with, I don't think it's uncommon for us at this particular time to say this is a very unfamiliar circumstance. I'm used to, trauma is about connection. It's about human relationships. It's about being with each other and how we resolve trauma traditionally and culturally was done in a collective of people together. And I can't see you. I can't see your facial expressions. I can't see your body movements. I can't pick up these little innuendos that tells me if I need to shift my dialogue or my instruction or offer a little something. So I just wanted to invite all of you right now, because this is about you. This is not actually about me. And maybe it's not even so much about SE, it's about you and being able to understand the underpinnings of why somatic experiencing has become such a vital and powerful tool in our world at this time. So how about if each of you just come back into yourself, just for a moment, quite simply, just feel your feet on the floor, feel your, what do we call it in English, your bum on the chair, your pelvis on the chair, just taking time to come back home to you. SE is about your body. It is biological and physiological before it is psychological. And that's what we so often forget in our society since the Enlightenment. We've been trying to cut off from the wisdom of our precious bodies. So this is a moment when, if you get anything out of this, perhaps I'll just give you the opportunity to remember what wisdom is held in your body that we mine in SE. So just allowing yourself to feel your presence in your own room, wherever you are now, all the different parts of the country or the world that you're in. And just let yourself notice the room, which may be very familiar to you. Just to share with you, I'm in a very tiny cottage in Western France, the end of a farm track, surrounded by nature, which is a huge resource for me. I'm supposed to be in England, but you know, there's quarantine. So I'm here. Where are you? Just allowing yourself to be aware of place right now. See, this is one of the things that we lose. We lose orientation with trauma. Everything gets scrambled. We lose direction and sense of self in place and time. So it's not that any of you have trauma. It's just in this little practice of coming back home to where you are right now. Yeah. And just being aware of whatever you're aware of in your body right now. And if possible, don't go looking for the achy bits, the stiff bits, the pieces you should have done a bit of Pilates or yoga around. Find where is most pleasurable in your body. What gives you most pleasure? I'm just noticing my hands, my farm girls' strong but capable hands. They're not pretty, but it gives me satisfaction to feel their competence and to know that they're there for me. How about for you? What's pleasure in your body? So just staying with that for a moment, the theme of pleasure. I hope you can find it easily. Many of my clients that come to me with entrenched PTSD have no orientation towards pleasure. Just allowing yourself. Yeah. Then, by way of an introduction, there's one thing I was going to say. Neil didn't send you the slides, did he? Well, it's not his bad. He's an extremely efficient man. But I asked him not to. The reason is, again, we're looking at accessing our body, at the sensations, the information that is constantly being reported from our body to our brain for information. And if we are looking at notes or scribbling, we're moving through the upper brain, and it's much, much harder to access the body. So got the slides in front, and you will be sent them later. So that's why you don't have them sitting right in front of you right now. It was my bad. I asked him not to. Okay, so trauma. How did I get into this business? Well, if I tell you a little story, it may be because you may be able to relate to some parts of it. It's my story. But some of the elements there you might relate to of things that have happened to you in the past because it was a very, very anodyne, small incident that swept me from one life that I was living into another. It was 21 years ago. I was at a stoplight in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I was living, raising a small child. And on my way to the office, so suddenly I flew out of my body. That's all I can say, is something happened and I didn't know what it was. Well, what it was, and I'm going to abbreviate this story, what it was that another car had rolled into the back of me, not at very high velocity. It was a low impact collision. Well, what happened after that is a story, and a long one, and we don't have time for that, but happy to share them at some time, is that within a very short period of time, I started experiencing unexplained, to myself and to the medical system at the time, unexplained symptoms when I began to feel that I was prematurely senile. This was 21 years ago. I don't have that excuse now. Prematurely senile, incapable, weak, deficient, and shameful. After a month of which the symptoms became increasingly worse, I went to my doctor, and it was a month. And this time is very important, this month period when we're talking about trauma, because in the first month, the symptoms we experience after an event are acute stress. It's acute stress, which is actually much easier to resolve than when you move past the month and it begins to become a pattern in your system. The symptoms develop a pattern in the system and it becomes post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what SE is designed to alleviate and resolve. I didn't know that at the time. I had not a clue. But right at that time, I wonder who destiny is. Peter Levine came to Santa Fe, New Mexico to give a talk. Peter Levine, thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for the work you've done, the dedication you have given your life. He said, I have dedicated my life to, oh no, he didn't. He said, I've actually forgotten the quote there, but basically that trauma had asked him to give his life to its study, which indeed he has. with phenomenal results. You may have seen him. He's very commonly online in the online trainings today, speaking very eloquently. And if you can, go to YouTube and watch him doing some of his sessions. There is his true brilliance. So he's written a number of books. Probably Waking the Tiger was his first and best known. In an Unspoken Voice. He has 2 PhDs, one in medical biophysics and the other in psychology. Yeah. And he worked on the Native American reservations near where I lived in New Mexico, where there is tremendous trauma, excuse my white cultural shame. And he worked with the NASA space stations, and then slowly the method evolved of somatic experiencing. Now, what is SE? Okay, it's here, the dry words. It's a short-term. This is how it was originally designed, was a short-term, naturalistic, we'll explain some of these things, therapeutic approach to resolve and renegotiate the effects of trauma. Right there is an hour's talk, okay? But we're not going to get into that. Let's leave that right now. But let's come down to SE is designed. This is one of the things that I love about SE. Yes, it's designed to resolve traumatic stress and to increase the capacity to negotiate stress and trauma. You know, we don't get to just close the story on our experience. That would be an unfortunate thing actually to happen, because we're nurtured and informed and evolve through our experiences. It's only when they become overwhelming that we need to be able to renegotiate them in order that they are unmanageable, that we can continue with our lives. So this increasing the capacity to negotiate stress and trauma is actually saying that what SE is doing is it's increasing our resilience to deal with what goes on out there. Now, many people with trauma remove themselves. They create lives that are quite small in order that they won't have to deal with more stuff. And when I'll explain a little bit about the nervous system. I think that will be made clear for you and hopefully helpful in your own understanding of difficulties that you've been through, and perhaps why SE may be something that's of interest to you also. SE, like many, is a synthetic approach. We've taken unashamedly, and hopefully we admit it, from many, many different branches. I know we have wonderful Deb Dana talking after, Steve Porges's polyvagal theory, which I have a big smile because that has informed me so hugely in my work with SE. So the polyvagal theory and the other aspects that you can see written in front. But for me, the ethological and the ethology and the physiology of stress is what we're going to be leaning into here. Ethology, what is ethology? It's the study of human behavior through its biology, right? Through its biology. And then the physiology of stress that we've known about for a long time, but somehow the whole subject and the understanding of trauma hasn't really caught hold until comparatively recently, considering how ancient we've always had trauma in our societies, and we've always had ways of dealing with it. When I do my 2-day introduction, I actually talk about that, because I think the history of trauma and why we're now all going, oh heavens, this trauma underlying our personal, our professional, our political, yes, and our planetary conditions. So looking at the ethology and the physiology of stress, or the physiology of stress is largely what we're going to be doing here as we go through and understand a little bit more about SE. Well, got 2 hours actually 1.5 hours to explain this, so why not break it down? Don't they say, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So breaking down the 3 key principles or key concepts of SE. The first one, which dates back to probably pre-Hippocrates. Hippocrates was, 495 BC, but said it very clearly, is that we get ill when we lose the capacity to self-regulate. And trauma, that's what trauma does. It destroys our ability to be able to move from pendulate from an extreme condition into a calming effect and then coming back to regulation. And we're doing it all the time, night and day, whether we're aware of it or not. But when we have symptoms that show up, almost invariably, it's a sign that this capacity to self-regulate or to heal has been capsized. Okay, so if I were working with you with your trauma, I don't get to fix you. No, I support you to be able to do what your body knows how to do, is to come back to its regulation, to its healing. Yeah, this is what we're doing with SE. The second concept is that trauma is in the body, not in the event. Yeah, well, no, isn't trauma in the event? What happened to me in 1999? Yeah, it happened to me in 1999. That instant is past, and maybe I invented it. You know, we know that there are false memories. I know that I forget things or misinterpret them after the event. But how come I'm still feeling it now? It's because it's in the body, not in the event. So in SE, we're focusing on the physical body, which is why also I'm very, very sad not to be able to see you, because so much of my work is in the non-verbal. Verbal is important, though. In SE, we don't focus on telling the story. The story, of course, is important. All your experiences are important. But many of us who've had difficulties have told the story over and over again, and yet we still feel rubbish. So we're looking at the body. The body is holding the trauma. And so we're working to allow the body to speak for itself in that unspoken voice, sometimes in movement, sometimes in changes of color, sometimes in shifts of the autonomic nervous system. Yeah, again, I'll explain a little bit more about that when we look at the nervous system. And then the third key concept, the symptoms of trauma are the result of undischarged survival energy in the nervous system. Wow, when I realized that, it made me understand a lot of I was working in therapeutic practice. I was trained as a ROFA, as a structural integrator, working with the fascial network. I didn't understand this about trauma. Okay, I'm going to step out now. I think we should learn this stuff in primary school, honestly. We should be learning to understand the capacity to self-regulate, and that this survival energy needs to be discharged. If somebody had managed to intervene with me in the first week or couple of weeks after I had been rear-ended by that car and had allowed the shock to come out of my system, well, I actually wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here, because here was something when trauma turns to transformation, because how it happened is that event was something that transformed my life. And I'd have to say for the better. But I'm hoping when I do the 2-day intros, I give anyone who attends would be able to support somebody, whether you're a therapist or not, it doesn't matter. This is a human factor. Would be able to support that person that's in shock, the friend, the person on the sidewalk that's fallen, be able to get the shock out of their system in order that they don't go into PTSD. So what is trauma? People ask me what I do, and I'm often hesitant. It's kind of a, showstopper when you say, well, I work with trauma. It's like, ooh, yeah. And people think of trauma by and large, or many people do, as being those big events that happen. It's what soldiers get, isn't it? It's what happens in bomb attacks, in these mammoth things. And sorry, and I don't want to mention them all because it's too disturbing. But no, my little story, which turned out to be a big life story, was of a very anodyne event. It was something quite small. But let's look at some of the definitions of trauma. We'll go first to Freud. A breach in the protective barrier against overstimulation. And this, when I read it, was yes, resulting in an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Yeah. All trauma, AE, imply that there has been a rupture in the boundaries that protect us. It may be that my skin has been cut and ruptured. That's what they call maybe a blunt instrument, a trauma. If I go to hospital, oh, it's got a trauma, it's a wound. And in Greek, it actually means a wound, trauma, traumata, yeah? A breach in the boundary, but it may be an energetic barrier, maybe directional boundary against resulting in an overwhelming sense of helplessness, which means that I did not have what was necessary to be able to deal with the event or the circumstances at that time. That overwhelming, have any of you ever felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness? I have. It's not good. But I tell you right now, just let your bodies move a little bit. Now, we're talking about trauma, and it's a very topical subject. There are many of you, thank you for coming today. Really, I think this is a very important topic, the topic of trauma that we're holding today. But just let your bodies move a little, yeah? Don't want you getting stuck in an overwhelming sense of helplessness because I'm telling you all these stories. Okay, just let your head and neck move. Maybe just look around your room a little bit and find something that attracts you. I just lighted on a picture of my beloved daughter when she was 10 on a picture frame. Yeah. These are little things we need to do to be able to be sure we don't get stuck in the magnetic attraction of trauma. It is magnetic. So Peter, okay, before you read this, just come inside your body for a moment and just let these words resonate a little bit inside you and notice what happens. Trauma is an internal straitjacket created when a devastating moment is frozen in time. Just that. What happened to your body as you heard those words? What did you feel? Did you feel any stiffening? Did you feel any freezing happen? Yeah, it may be familiar to you. It's familiar to most of us. So move it again. We don't want to get stuck in that. Yeah. These responses are meant to be temporary. We're not supposed to be stuck for long periods of time, frozen in time. That's trauma. So just let yourself move, breathe, wiggle your feet. Yep, whatever it is you need to do. It strangles the unfolding of our being and stifles our attempts to move forward with our lives. It disconnects us from ourselves, from others, nature, and spirit. Trauma disconnects on one or other levels of our experience. So let's feel again. Let's feel again the group of us here today paying attention at this moment. Yeah, let's just feel. Even though you can't see them, can you just feel as if we're in a big, big circle together? Yeah, a huge circle of like-minded, interested, dedicated people. Yeah. Those circles were what held together indigenous societies when they were dealing with trauma. They came together in circles that they could each put their attention into the middle of where the icon was. So just for a second, holding that connection with all of us here. Or maybe if that's too difficult, just allow yourself to think of someone or something that you feel a connection with. And notice how your body holds that. Notice what happens in your body. I like this one. I like all of them. But sometimes the simplicity is what conveys the most. We can say that trauma is anything that is too much, too soon, too fast. It's too much to handle. So what happens is the body has to go into shutdown to pretend it's not there, or that the shock isn't there, or the too much isn't there. It's just too much, and we shut down. So too much, too soon, too fast. And if you felt that, you just didn't have the time to get together your resources to handle the situation, and it overwhelmed you. I'm actually often replacing the word trauma, which has so much societal impact and which Hollywood excavates very successfully, into overwhelming experiences. So where is SE used? Yeah, I'd say anywhere there is a nervous system. Anywhere there is a nervous system. It doesn't even have to be a human nervous system. We're using SE with animals. Actually, they are often the therapists and horses. But my dog here used to get terrified of the lightning. Perhaps your dogs do too, if you have dogs too. Notice what they do. Yeah? We'll use those simple tools to be able to calm and reassure and bring each other to safety. But really, my SE, Neil did mention that I was trained as a home birth midwife. And it wasn't until well after I was working as a midwife, I came to SE and I went, oh, actually, midwives working from home, which is a very different context. Hospitals are really important and where most of us have our babies because many of us feel that's safer. But having a baby at home with a midwife is a particular experience. And I was aware that even though I wasn't trained to, midwives inherently understand how to be able to support the physiology of the birthing woman who knows very well how to birth. You know, fear is one of the biggest interrupters. I mean, fear is underlying most of our symptoms. And fear is one of the reasons why contractions may stop, yeah? Why difficulties come up in birth. There are many. But by and large, if we can create safety for the woman and hold the space for her, intervene just marginally when we should need to, then the majority of women birth very successfully and safely. My own particular nature, being something of a traveler and an adventurer, has taken me into working in critical incidences. From the first time working in the tsunami in Southeast Asia. And here I'm going to I've got a little list of other things very different in their tone. In KwaZulu-Land, it was working with Amashlubi African ladies who were fighting to get their lands back. And it's a different kind of trauma. Working with the US military the day before, there was the medical corps before they went to Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm finding my head is getting a little light right now as I talk about these things. So I'm going to put my feet on the ground. It brings back so many memories and so many things I'd love to talk to you about. So I'm just going to slow down a little bit myself. Slowing down is helpful for me. And then I take a breath. And maybe you do too. Those two pictures there are real pictures. Yeah. Yeah. So come down into your feet. It's what we call grounding. Yeah. Just feeling the connection of your feet to the floor. Yeah. Taking your time. Noticing how it is. Feeling your body on the chair. Where are your arms or your hands? Are they touching your body? Are they touching each other? Just notice the contact. Yeah. Just noticing. We use grounding as one of our primary tools. It's not unique to SE, but you probably all know it. But we do it from the understanding of the physiological essence of grounding, that what it does is it brings us back to the here and now. When we're really feeling that connection, like that rock in the Japanese garden, it's there. Yeah, those concentric circles of life around it, but there it is in the sand. Creates a sense of safety. I'm here and I'm okay. Yeah. Bessel van der Kolk, one of our biggest medical icons in the field of trauma, says quite simply, trauma is the inability to stay in the here and now. Seems so simple, doesn't it? Then why don't we just get everybody to stay in the here and now? Can you? Always? Can I? Always? No. No. Kids going into school now, sitting at a desk, being told they have ADHD. Yeah. this way and that way. Can't be right here and now. There's too much energy in their systems. So grounding. What was it? There are many people working in the field of trauma now, brilliant, brilliant minds with great, great, wonderful educational programs. But Peter's burning question that led him into this exploration was, how come animals in the wild, who are constantly exposed to life-threatening events, don't develop the symptoms of PTSD as humans do? Yeah, they don't. If we captivate animals, we can certainly traumatize them. But animals in the wild don't experience PTSD. Let me show you a little movie that might explain why. Okay, I'm not going to show you this next piece because we'll get into a bit more the next sort of stage of SE. But I'm very sorry for those of you that haven't been able to see the movie. You'll have to come and do the intro, sorry. But just for those of you, because apparently quite a lot couldn't, it was a polar bear that was being anesthetized by game wardens in order that they could put tracking to track the bear. But what actually happens with an anesthetic that happens to us also when we have surgery, we're put into an artificial freeze response. That polar bear was running across the ice floes to escape. Enormous amount of energy being produced of adrenaline, noradrenaline, to fuel its muscles into escaping. You know, these polar bears have only one predator on the planet, and that's us. Tremendously powerful creatures. So he's running, and suddenly he stopped in mid-pace and is frozen. Yeah. What happens to that energy that has been launched into his system for the escape? This is what Peter was noticing. Now, in the polar bear's case, the polar bear, as he came out of the anesthetic and the men weren't bugging him, they were just standing around, yeah, he took an enormous breath. And he had a shaking and a trembling that was going on through his body spontaneously that allows that residual survival energy to be expelled from the system. And what Peter has said, and what has been borne out by experience and certainly mine in therapeutic practice, is that when we're not able to release that underlying nuclear survival energy, it emerges as symptoms. Yeah. The symptoms that some doctor friends of mine have said, well, 85% of the things we go to our doctor's surgery, we call it, the doctor's office for, are this dysregulation in the ability to release the highly charged energy and then to come back to regulation. So when that polar bear has kind of blown off the rest of the anesthetic, or maybe the freeze response, yeah, it's an artificial freeze response we gave him, then he can get up and he can go back about his work and he won't be suffering, or she won't suffer any residual effects. And if an animal did suffer from PTSD in the wilds, it would be dinner in a very short order. It would be eaten. Sorry, I'm just trying to come back to my... Here we go. Yeah, I can't help but seeing some of your questions come up. And again, I'm technology. I have technology trauma. It's my trauma I have. But what a wonderful device it is for connecting us and getting to know each other. So let's come back to our presentation of the Polar Bear movie. Okay. So again, traumatic symptoms are not caused by the event itself. They arise when the residual energy from the experience is not discharged from the body. This energy remains trapped in the nervous system where it can wreak havoc on our bodies and minds. So to loop back to that little story I told you about my benign car accident in 1999, is that if somebody could have come, I pulled it all together. I held it all together. You know, single mum, I'm efficient, I hold it all together. I'm also kind of English. So hold it all together, I'm fine. And I did not allow my body to do what it really wanted to do, which is to discharge that energy. It's not socially appropriate, whatever it would be, but no, I overruled it with my neocortex. Just hold it together, go to work and keep it all together at my cost. But thank heavens that I did, or as I say, I wouldn't be here with you today. I'll tell you what, why don't we, before we get into doing the nervous system, why don't you just let yourself, if I stand up, you're not going to be able to see me, but I can't see you anyway. Why don't you all just stand up and just let yourself move a little bit? Yeah. Even just touching in on some of this material can evoke responses on us that can be unexpected. And normally I'd be watching you and be able to go, okay, just notice that for a moment. But I can't, so I want to make sure that you're all right. And just let yourself focus on whatever it is in your room that makes you feel safe, puts a smile on your face, like the lovely picture of my little daughter. Yeah. And notice what your body wants to do. Remember, nobody can see you. You get to do whatever you want to do. Yeah. You want to stretch. Do you want to yawn? What do you want to do? What does the precious animal of your body want to do? It's been sitting in front of a screen for some period of time. Yeah, and just notice how it responds to that permission for it to do what it wants to do. How many of us have been allowed to do that in our lives? Yeah. Here's your chance. Okay? You know, I'm not great at external technology. I've got to be reasonably adept with our internal technology, and that was a little late in the day as far as I was concerned. I wish I'd understand the simple principles of how we wonderful creatures respond to threat when I was much younger, certainly before I took up professional activities working with other people, but I didn't. So I'm sure many of you will got great experience with the nervous system, but to put us all on the same page, let's just run through the basic principles of the nervous system. No, don't do that. It's being really trigger happy. My apologies. I'll get there. Okay. So we're going to divide things up into easy parts. We're looking at the nervous system. Just simply, we have the central nervous system, which you can see the white figure on the left. And that's basically the brain and the spinal cord. So if somebody, sorry, I hear a voice in the background.
We emailed in 24 hours for this current lecture.
I've got some voices on. Anyway, never mind about that. The brain and the spinal cord. You know, the brain is at the center of intelligence. No, it's like it's a sorting center. It's a middle of the post office, like my computer with the lead in. It's the computer. Information in, information out. That's the central nervous system. I would love it. Would you mind very much? I know I didn't do that. Switching your mics off. And thank you for telling me, because I left mine on, so I hope you didn't hear too much personal activities happening. So switch your mics off until you want to perhaps say something at the end. So the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. Information in, information out. Then we have the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is divided into two parts. The peripheral nervous system is everything else, right, except the brain and the spinal cord. And that is divided into the somatic nervous system, also called sensory motor. You may have heard there's Pat Ogden's wonderful training is sensory motor psychotherapy. So sensory motor, which is primarily about the muscles of which we have primarily voluntary control. So if I choose to do this, this is my somatic nervous system. Yep, I get to choose. There are some things such as reflexes that I don't have control over. If somebody taps my knee, my leg's going to fly out and kick them. But by and large, think voluntary. Okay. It's okay. You can talk, really. So underneath that, we have the autonomic nervous system. Oh, just coming back, somatic nervous system, we're basically looking at fight and flight here. Yeah, this is action stations. That's what the somatic nervous system's muscles contract and we perform movements, right? So that's that stage. Then we have the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is basically looking at the organs of the body. Okay, let's go into that. Oh, come back here. Yeah, the organs of the body. The autonomic nervous system is governing the unconscious, intuitive, automatic responses in our bodies. This is what keeps you alive. You can be in a coma, or you can be a paraplegic. May please not happen to any of us, but you can stay alive. Yeah. Why? Because underneath it all, if the autonomic nervous system is still going on, you will be able to stay alive for long, long periods of time. Yeah. If you cut off the autonomic nervous system, you're dead in 3 minutes, basically. Yeah. We're looking at the glands, the beating of the heart, the digestion, the lungs, the sexual organs, the eliminatory organs, the glands, the brain, that soft tissue, right? We don't get to be going, think I'll pump out a bit more adrenals from my adrenal cortex, and it happens. No, it's the stimulus that makes that happen. It's unconscious, outside our control, unless you are a sage and a sadhu, in which you can control your breathing and your heart rate for very long periods of time. Haven't reached that yet, and probably never will. So think autonomic nervous system. Now, why is that so important? It's because this is the primary, I was going to say attack zone. This is what is primarily affected by trauma, by overwhelming events. Yeah. It's not actually in the emotions, though they're all associated. They go up the different pathways of experience, but it's the autonomic nervous system that is first dysregulated. The breathing goes, the heart is out. You think of some of the major diseases in our society. Look at respiratory diseases. I shouldn't be talking about that now, should I? It's a bit topical. Anyway, we're looking at the lungs. We're looking at breathing. We're looking at heart rate. How much heart disease there is in our culture? I wonder why. Yeah, could it be that the levels of stress that we're all holding in our culture are partly responsible for that? It is eroding the capacity of our heart to be able to keep up with the stress. We need our hearts beating fast when we have to produce a lot of action. A lot of action, our hearts beat faster. You keep that going for a long period of time with your heart rate up around 100. And I'm sorry, folks, but you're going to get unwell on one level or another. We're designed to be able to move in and out of dealing with stresses in a manageable way. So the autonomic nervous system has two branches. It has the sympathetic branch, which call it the accelerator. Peter calls it the gas, the accelerator. I call it the rocket. Why? Because it moves very fast. It causes the organs to prepare for action. Through the HPA, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, is just, sometimes it's a smell, sometimes it's a movement, sometimes it's a look in someone's eye, sometimes it can be anything, and information is flooded into our system in such an incredibly articulate way to prepare us to deal with the threat. Actually, not always appropriately according to the circumstances, but what our life's story has told us we should do unconsciously, okay? So it prepares the organs for action. Why? First is a constriction. And simply, we're looking in life, I think it's probably a binary system. Everything is constriction, expansion, constriction, expansion. But we constrict in order that we can prepare our muscles for action. But when we constrict, all the way through with the tonic constriction, what's happening to my breathing right now? I'm not breathing so well. No, it's all going into my muscles right now. Go. That's fine. I go and deal with what I'm doing, go and deal with the threat that I have to deal with. And after that, I need to be able to take a big breath and let that tension go. Right? That's the role of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the other branch. So the sympathetic branch is the rocket, you know. Step into the road and here comes the 207 bus. And I jump back without thinking about it. That's a sympathetic response, a highly adrenalized response. Yeah, the adrenaline flooding my system. Take a breath. The parasympathetic nervous system comes in and calms down that biological, that physiological response and calms it back down. But something really important to note, if the sympathetic branch is the rocket or the accelerator or the foot on the gas, as Peter Levine says, the parasympathetic branch is much slower. It's a slow brake, bringing down the high levels of survival energy in the body, bringing down that response. It takes longer. I'm sure none of you get angry, but if any of you do, you may know that you can get angry quite quickly like that. Yeah? How much longer does it take you to get unangry, to chill out after? Listen, really, to chill out. Yeah? So the parasympathetic branch operates, I call it like the parachute. The rocket goes up, yeah? Action stations, deal with a threat. Whoa! But then the parasympathetic nervous system steps in and it just quietly calms that energy and helps us to settle. All these things we're tracking and watching, often many times in the course of an SE session. You know, you will notice it happening in your everyday life. This is not just for therapy at all. This is life. This is what we do. So, and this is a model. These are all models. Remember, the map is not the terrain, but it's a model that I find useful working with people, and particularly with SE. Well, actually, in my life also. Okay, we need to calm things down, and the technology we might use to support that, knowing it takes time to chill out and to calm down. And how can we allow that? It doesn't take hours. How can we allow that when so much pressure is being put on us for action? So many of us never really calm down. Anyone have any sleeping problems? Nah, sure not. It's very, very hard to sleep when you're still in sympathetic arousal. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You will have these slides. I'm just repeating here. So we're looking, the autonomic nervous system controls the internal organs, including the heart rate, lungs. Your breathing is so important. Do you know that, and again, doctors have told me, so this is secondhand, that the majority of ambulance runs for people with suspected heart attacks, or a very, very high percentage, are people whose hearts are actually constitutionally fine, but they have a breathing problem. Yeah, they're over-breathing. There is a miscombination or an imbalance between the CO2 and the oxygen in the blood, which causes cell starvation. So I have been told, but isn't that interesting? Just breathing. So just notice your breath right now. Don't try and change it. Don't try and do good yogic breathing. Just allow your breath to breathe the way it wants to. I took a longer breath because I was in sympathetic activation, sympathetic nervous system, in getting excited and explaining this to you, right up here. And then my body wanted to take a big breath, like the polar bear, yeah? And then I get calm again. In SE, we don't direct people, somatic experiencing, we don't direct people, okay, now do this and do that, now take a deep breath. We don't, and as a midwife, I don't do that either. I have reasons why, which I can explain later. It would just be if I'm working with somebody and I notice that they're hardly breathing, how do I notice it? Often because I stop breathing too, you know? That's what we're doing. We're co-regulating, we're mirror neurons here. See my breathing stopped, and I might just say, okay, just notice your breath, just like that. Just an invitation to notice the breath. And when the person just brings the awareness to the breath, the breathing shifts. And it shifts to adapt to the physiology needed for that particular circumstance. This loops back to that key concept, the number one key concept, is that our bodies know how to self-regulate. If I say to somebody whose breathing has got really, it's done it for a purpose, okay, now take a deep breath, I may dysregulate them. It's not what their underlying physiology, I don't know what it needed. It's not what their underlying physiology needed. It just needed to bring the awareness, the first step, which we use hugely, just bringing awareness to something supports it to shift to another state. Just notice the breath. Yeah. And now what do you notice? Whoa, I'm back again. Very common. So it's just one little piece about breathing there, which we could do another 2 days on anyway. So the blood pressure, yes, with that constriction, the heart's going to beat faster because it's got to pump the blood around the body. The lung rate, the breathing rate's going to change because I've got this constriction pattern going. Blood pressure's going to go up. I'm not going to be digesting my lunch. Sweat, secretion, muscle tone, we've got contraction, right? And that can happen with a flash of an eyelid. These are the things that we're watching all the time, just gently, not scrutinizing, but just noticing when we're working with our clients with SE. We're noticing those non-verbal cues. There is such beauty in the expression that happens without words. Okay. In emergency, the ANS employs four very important survival functions. Now, I'm stepping unqualified onto Deb Dana's ground. We're talking about the polyvagal system, but I'm just going to do it in a little practical way with a little movie clip. Now, we all have default survival mechanisms, defense mechanisms, strategies, of which there are actually only 4. Okay, so you can flush them out and, some people kick and some people do other things, but really, and they are evolutionarily based. Probably the first one we had when we were little tiny microorganisms in water was the freeze. There's a threat, we just stiffen our membranes and just shut down. Yep. If I shut down, I won't feel the pain of death. And maybe nobody will notice me anyway. Okay. I'm being a little organism, but this is what we actually do, we humans. Yeah, we will go into a freeze in order not to be able to feel the intensity of what's going on or the terror that's going on. And also in an attempt just to feel, if I really don't move, the predator's not going to see me and will go past, which some animals do very successfully, and some of us do. Keep really, really still and hardly breathe. But it's only meant to be short term. Only short term. We can't hold that freeze for too long before we're going to start symptomizing. Then we have, so some people with a threat, it took me years to see me beetling all over the world and being quite a tough little cookie. I didn't realize what my primary defense was. I'm going to do a little check out, and I'll show you a little movie clip afterwards to see, do you know what yours is? Okay, because the other one's a flight. Difficulty comes up, I'm out of dodge. Okay, I'm just going to beetle off. I'm out of here. Or something comes up and immediately I'm going to get, in your face. No, you're wrong. Or get aggressive. Of course, violence can come out of that too. Now, the apogee of our human development is that we should be able to resolve threats or conflicts through social engagement. Hey, you really me off, but listen, let's go have a cup of tea and talk about this, okay? On the golf course, that sort of social engagement. We'll work through our business deals, which could be difficult. In playing, because when we're playing, you can't play and be frightened at the same time. It's not play, okay? So social engagement, the highest part of our mammalian capacity, I'm sure your dogs can do it too, and our human capacity is the social engagement. And so we can use that in politics. You might call it diplomacy. Wouldn't it be nice to have a bit more of that around? You see what I'm saying? I think this stuff around trauma is personal, my own, professional, how I can support another with their symptoms of their difficulties. It's political, need I say more, what's going on right now, and it's planetary. Healthy, sane, regulated humans do not do what we're doing to the planet. Not what you're doing, but what we're doing to the planet. You know what I mean? And excuse me if I take off. I do find this subject really political in the biggest sense too. So I'm going to show you a little movie clip. And it's American, so it does have a little bit of bad language. If you don't like bad language, I'm sorry, I'll blame the Americans, okay? So I'm going to show you a little clip, and just notice, but what I'm going to suggest you do, it's playful. I hope you'll find it funny, and it's serious too, but that you just notice your own body responses as you watch the screen, yeah? When I'm teaching the intros, I show quite a lot of movie clips, and I swear that no one can watch a Netflix movie anymore without running the nervous system through it. So I hope I won't give you that habit, but it's actually quite fun too. So here's a little movie clip. Notice your body, just feel your feet on the ground right now to bring you to present. So your body, sensation, information, intelligence is more available to you. And maybe as I'm putting it on, just look at that favorite picture place in your room, little daughter there, and show you the clip. So what did you notice? Oh, I so wish I was with you. What did you notice? Was anything familiar there for you? What would you have done if you'd gone past the snowman? You might not know. You might not know. But you might now just begin to notice, you know, when something tough comes up. I know certain things, certain voices that will make me shut down, and other things I just want to, bye, I'm out of here. And other things I want to stand up and state my ground. You know, that's activism too, isn't it? It's standing your ground and speaking up. And then there's the social engagement. That's kind of social engagement. The social engagement when we sit down and we discuss, like those two older guys did with the snowman. Now, I don't know. And they were laughing. Of course, they were laughing because they'd been a little bit shocked. And laughter is a great way of dispelling highly roused energy. So don't forget the laughter. Thank heavens we have a great sense of humor over in this part of the world. Yeah. So what is it that makes us fight, flight, freeze, or social engage as a default mechanism? Hold on a second here. I'm just going to move on down this way. Before I move on to that, evolutionary base. If I am a little tiny baby and I am being terrified or hurt or something that terrified or hurt, there's not very much I can do about it. I can't use my fight and flight responses because I'm just a little tiny baby and I can't walk yet. And I can't really use my voice except to cry. And if I cry and cry and cry and no one comes and attends, crying, high sympathetic energy, yeah, and no one comes and attends to my needs, I'm going to give up. I'm going to shut down. An overwhelming sense of helplessness. Remember, that was the Freudian definition I showed you earlier. An overwhelming sense of helplessness. I actually feel myself feeling that a bit right now. So let's move it a bit because I don't want to feel helpless. But that's the baby. Now, if the baby has survived, it's actually learned unconsciously that when something comes up, just go into shutdown, just go into shutdown and freeze because there's nothing that you can do about it. And that is inclined to follow us. It may follow us through our lives, that we may not be developing the natural evolution process of the flight and the fight response. Yeah. I have a feeling this is why so many teenagers rebel, because they're big enough and because they can. But when we're little, and even when we can walk and talk and we're 5, it's very hard to confront a big person about an issue. It's very hard to go, don't hurt me, don't do this, I'm going to run away. You can't, you're trapped. So that freeze response sits in all of us, and it's necessary. Sometimes we need to go into freeze. It's the best pathway to follow to save our lives. This is all about survival. Our nervous system is there for one reason, is that we survive. What we want to do, in this case, is to move from survival into flourishing. But many of us are still stuck in survival. I was. Okay. So in SE, we're supporting people to move from the pathways the shutdown freeze, the default freeze that people will do, and that confuses them. They're competent, grown adults in a certain situation. Suddenly, they've frozen. They can't speak. They can't move. They've gone pale. Yeah, they couldn't respond to the event. Yeah, which in some senses, I say, is appropriate, and others is no longer appropriate. It's maladaptive. So we're looking at being able to support people to move through, to have access to all the four defense responses. Yeah. Sometimes, unfortunately, we need to fight and fight hard. Yeah. Sometimes we need to be smart and we need to just leave the scene. Hopefully, we can move towards living in a world where we can negotiate difficulties together as humans in discussion, in talk, in the circle, bringing things together and resolving. I think we're a little bit away from that yet, but I'm not going to give up trying. Okay? All right. Resilience. Yep, we know and love this word, don't we? Is that one getting overused too? Well, let's see what it is. You have resilient nervous systems. You wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't. And what does that mean? That means is that, you got up to go and have a cup of tea or something like that. There's a little sympathetic charge, and maybe you found that you hadn't fed your cat this morning, a little bit more sympathetic energy. And then you had your cup of tea, so you had a little bit of parasympathetic. You sat down for a while and you just hung out for a little bit. We're doing this all the time. It's easy charge, easy discharge. A little bit of sympathetic action, a bit of conversation, a little bit of something, a little dance around the room, and then we sit down. That's the way it's meant to be. Easy charge, easy discharge. No problem with that. Then we're moving into something bigger is happening. So there's little wriggly green lines, the green lines at the beginning, right? Digital wriggly lines. Those are the sine wave that you saw on the preceding slide. Yeah, that's a little bit of charge, a little bit of discharge, it's normal. But then suddenly something bigger than usual happens, a shock of some sort. That telephone calls come through with a totally unexpected news, and your sympathetic energy spike rockets up, and it's like, oh my gosh, you put down the phone, you think, ooh, that was rough, what am I going to do about that? You sit down, you talk to your partner, you do something, and the parasympathetic comes in and chills down that first alpine spike. It chills down. Now, something very important is the two dotted lines are what we call our range of resilience or our window of tolerance. This is super important. It's invisible and it changes often through the course of a day. In the morning, perhaps, we have more resilience than we do when we're really tired and worn out in the evening. Yeah, so we need to be quiet and rest and go to sleep so we recharge our batteries. So those windows of tolerances are actually early childhood trauma can make that window of tolerance very narrow, which makes people especially prone to things, to not being able to deal with the stresses in life and therefore being more easily disposed to trauma later on in life. Yeah, the range of resilience, the window of tolerance is super important for our well-being. And this is what we're looking to increase with SE. I said, I really like that. It helps us to be even more capable of dealing with life's ups and downs than before the trauma. How about that? Yeah? Anyway, I'll have to just let you sit on that one, but that's actually what we're looking to do, is to support people in having the widest range of resilience or window of tolerance possible. Not that they should put up with rubbish. It's not about that. It's that they should be able to deal with difficulties with appropriate means. Yeah. But when you've had, now look at the next red spike, Alpine Peak, something else happens. Oh my gosh, there's two things in one day. And so the parasympathetic comes in and it pulls it actually down further than it would normally in that sine wave. And that's the time after something happens when you might feel some sort of lassitude, your muscles feel flaccid, you just, I'm going to collapse on the couch for a moment. I don't feel good. But what's happening is your body's being given permission to begin to regain the energy spent in that next alpine peak, that next red peak there, going from left to right. Okay, so I have my little rest on the couch, and then I go out my old Volvo, and I'm driving down the streets of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I'm at a red traffic light waiting to go to my work, and suddenly something else happens. Bam! Or it feels like an explosion. Somebody's run into the back of me. And it's as if my nervous system, I'm going to anthropomorphize my nervous system, says, I've had it. First this, and then something else. Life is not safe. I am going to stick in hypervigilance to make sure nothing else gets me. Yeah? That we call being stuck in sympathetic high, stuck on high alert, hypervigilance, very quick emotional responses, turning thoughts, quick movements, nervousness, palpitations. Insomnia sits right in there too. That's stuck in high sympathetic arousal. Now, our friend the nervous system doesn't want to stay in that high arousal, because if we do and our heart's beating at 120 beats a minute, how long can it do that before we actually die? Because that is what would happen if we stayed in that super high arousal for long periods of time. So old parasympathetic nervous system comes in and it pulls down that high arousal. It pulls it down. Here's the high arousal. It pulls it down into a stuck point below the norm of the range of resilience. And then we start to experience, I'm going to move to another slide, we start to experience the signs down bottom right of the page, a hypoarousal. This is the same chart done in a different, in a less arty format. And we start feeling flat affect, don't register any emotions, spacey, dissociated, depressed. It seems to be characterized by lack of energy in the system. And I say physical collapse, disempowerment, yeah? And I say it seems to be characterized because, and this is something golden I learned in SE, because I didn't understand when I was working with people with depression, some of these things. I thought if you put more energy into them, like your parents say, pull up your socks and get on your pony, when you're feeling really low. No, because underneath that parasympathetic pull down is the highly aroused charge of the hyperarousal of the sympathetic nervous system. Okay? Levine calls this having the brake and the accelerator on at the same time. Can you smell the burning rubber? Have you ever done that? Yeah? You got your foot on the accelerator and you pull on the handbrake. Whoa. Yeah. And that's what we're looking at as these shut down symptoms, is that the two of them are bound together. So working with hyperarousal is actually much more straightforward than it is working with hypoarousal, which is well known. I think dissociation is one of the bugbears of the psychotherapeutic profession. But remembering that underneath that times when you're feeling, shut down and exhausted or collapsed or disempowered, that there is the potency, the potential of an enormous amount of energy in that. But it needs to be handled really gently. And that's another of the things that I love about SE. It's powerful, but it's very gentle. It's very respectful. We don't force the physiology. We don't tell people, now do this, now do that, take a deep breath, move this, move that. Only if we're working in critical circumstances, that's another whole thing. We will invite, we will suggest. Trauma is not gentle. We didn't get to choose it. Yeah? It happened too fast for us to do something about it. It was too much to manage. It's a violence on us. So in order to be able to restore the nervous system to its patency, we need to be able to invite it, because underneath trauma is always terror, yeah? So you don't want to go pushing somebody back into the terror again, because if I walk straight into that hypoarousal, the shutdown response, and I tried to push somebody out by pushing more energy into them, they would quite likely, the energy would release and they would fly up into a high level of excitement, of excitation, and the nervous system would then go, been there, done that, thank you very much, and shut us down even further, re-traumatize us. So the process we use with SE is very gentle, incremental steps to slowly melt that freeze, slowly take off the brake in order to allow that underlying energy to gently be reabsorbed into what is manageable within the window of tolerance. I can manage feeling this much right now. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. And as you do that, bit by bit, the window of tolerance gets bigger. Now, people say, how come you work with trauma? You work with, something matter with you working with traumatists. You don't understand the people I get to meet. And Trauma Transformed is a magnificent sight to see, because the person almost invariably has more capacity when the trauma is resolved than they had before the trauma. I hope it's making it clear. This chart, I'm not big on charts, but I actually have a copy of this that I keep in my office, that I can explain this to clients. I can depathologize their symptoms, because people don't understand. The symptoms are not the problem. They're problematic, but they're not the problem. The problem is the underlying dysregulation in the nervous system. That's what we need to address. Now, people come to me, don't want to be, going to violent attacks, whatever it would be, but they don't understand. So remember also, trauma and shame go hand in glove. We do things, we just don't know how it happened, and we shame and blame ourselves for that, which it's not to condone terrible behavior, but if we can understand that we're programmed to do these things, let's get down and work with the internal technology. Yeah? So I keep this chart. Sometimes my clients say, look, this is what's going on here. And then I have one which I put traffic lights on. Thank you, Stephen Porges. I put traffic lights on, green, yellow, and red. And I help children to feel through their bodies when they're in green zone, when they're at school and they're playing with their friends and they're feeling, they're having a good time, they're in green zone. And then something's coming up and they're not feeling good. Little Johnny is bugging the hell out of them. Well, okay, watch out. You're in yellow then. That's the time to be doing something. That's the time we would do a little intervention and help with the regulation. Where you don't want to go is to go down into the red zone, okay? And kids like that, changing traffic lights, changing gears, that we can make it something that's easy for them to assimilate. Okay, we can just bring down that high activation, just change a gear a little bit. Or change up a gear a little bit. So anyway, a simple chart, but I found it, I was not a young woman, I was quite an experienced woman and therapist when I came across SE, but some of these things were so golden, I bless them. Oh, didn't want you to see that one yet, but you did. Okay, so we've given the most elementary, superficial expose of a little bit of what SE is about. How do we work with it? Well, that's why it's a 3-year training program. But in the intros, I give enough. I'll give you a little something now. We've already touched on it too. So little tools that you can use that will help you to come back to you to make life more manageable. And I always say that if I offer tools, they don't work for you, throw them over your shoulder and find something better. But do let me know what you found, okay? So already we have brought in the grounding. No, when I bring my attention, and how about we do it right now? If I bring my attention down to my feet on the floor, my little cottage beside the Loire. Oh, I noticed I took a breath then. Yeah, just feeling my feet, and then I can feel my sits bones on there. And I noticed that I just was rocking a bit. Why? Because perhaps rocking helps me to feel my edges a bit more. And then I'm not leaning against the back of the chair, maybe you are, in which case just notice the the contact of your back against the chair. Yeah, just notice where your edges meet the environment. I'm noticing my hands are on my knees, just moving back and forth on my knees right now. Yeah, what are your hands doing? Just notice. Yeah, it's just a little grounding that helps us to bring back, not into anticipating the future or worrying about the past, but just being right here and now, as Bessel said. The ability to be in the here and now. Most likely you are safe where you are right now. I hope you are. Yeah. So the grounding that we will, that trauma always happens when we haven't had the appropriate resource available to deal with the trauma. There's always a resource of some sort that's missing. Now, I'll give you an example. I'm going to show you the picture, the little one that I flash back and forth. And just notice remember, everyone is unique and individual, that one person's response isn't going to be the same as the next person, but just notice the physical sensations, the physical responses in your body when you look at this simple picture. Okay, well, I mean, I don't know if you saw a smile on my face, but it just makes me smile. I have to admit that I'm a passionate animal and nature lover. And so those little guys there sitting, for me, my interpretation was that the bigger lizard was taking care of the little lizard. But I'm very well aware that may not be what you got. You may not, and that's fine, you may not like lizards, and you may have seen that hand as dominating the lizard, in which case this wouldn't be a good resource picture for you, or thought. Because we're looking at orienting our clients towards that which makes them feel safe, the antithesis of the traumatic symptom we're dealing with. So if somebody has been in great threat to their lives, I want to be able to orient them towards something that makes them feel safe. Not an idea, that's upper brain story, but that they can embody that sense of safety. It may be a sense of safety. How about for you right now? Is there a place or a person or an activity, a memory that brings the sense of safety into your body? Yeah? Or even just a little bit of safety. Or sometimes I even use the expression, finding something that makes you feel the way you'd always like to feel. Shall I show you mine? That's the picture I was pointing to. My little 10-year-old, who's now 33, but I still look at that picture and my breath comes in, my chest gets warm. I want to reach out and hold that little person. Yeah. And it feels like it. Yeah. That's a resource. It's extremely important that we have an inventory of as many resources as we can around us. There's one thing focusing on trauma. As I said, it's very magnetic and all-consuming. But how about that we would orient ourselves rather towards the resources we have in life? Yeah? I kind of do it like if trauma's over here, that intention on trauma, I've got to deal with the difficulty. How about if we were to look and appreciate what we have in our lives? Sometimes it may not be very much. I work with some people that really don't have very much resource in their life. Look at some of the pictures I was showing you earlier, right? Not just in natural disasters, but in my little street in London. Very few resources. But how can we expand and develop them? Sometimes one resource, one small resource, is big enough to begin to start to unpick the trauma. I'll teach you that in the intro if you want to come and do it. So for now, because I know we want some time that we can do so, I'm just going to invite you just to stay for a little moment and allow yourself to bring to mind, let's use anything, anyone, these things. It can be a pet, a favorite place, nature, recreations, activities, external and internal, your own sense of humor, your creativity, your courage. Those are internal resources. It doesn't matter what. But what is it that you have in your life that reliably supports you to feel the way you'd like to be feeling, the way you'd always like to be feeling? Huh? Let's just give it a minute. And notice your body as you sit with it. This is the important thing. It's not about having a thought. It's that your precious body should be able to feel it. Yeah. This is about your precious body. So enjoy for a moment. And if you have many of those resources, blessings be. And if you don't feel you have many, start to notice them. Start to notice where the resource is. And you may be surprised just how much there is out there for you. Yeah? Yeah, so just coming back to the screen again. I love this. I just found this from Dan Siegel. You want to do something really valuable with your life, treat unresolved trauma. And I would like to say to those of you that are not or have no intention of being therapists, this is not, therapy is a specialized, profession for dealing with trauma amongst other things. But each and every one of us has the capacity to support ourselves and each other, whether they're strangers or in our family, not to go into those peaks and curves and symptoms that trauma invokes in us. Yeah, each one of us have a responsibility in supporting the resolution and prevention. We can do that too, of trauma. Yeah, and I would really love to have the opportunity of some of you and taking it the next step, because I know this was very superficial, but I'm also aware that we want to allow some time for questions and answers. And really, thank you very, very much for your attention.
That's us ready to do the Q&A now.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Hey, thanks a million for a great presentation. I think everybody really enjoyed that. So the first question here we've got is from... Yeah. So the first question we've got here is from Jan. Do you recommend working with trauma soon after an incident? And I seem to remember some research suggests it can be harmful to work with trauma so soon after an event has taken place. How do you resolve that?
It's on a spectrum, okay? Is that in some, take this, a car crash, right? I'm not going to rush in when somebody, and excuse me everybody with these graphic illustrations, go find your resource if you're finding it difficult. I'm not going to go rushing in and go, I need to do SE, I need to do NSE, I need to do SE on this person. No, what we need to do is save their life. They need the paramedics in there that are going to bind up the wounds, make sure that their life support systems are operating, okay? We need to be judicious, and we need to be unegotistical, excuse me saying need, be aware of the ego that wants to get in and do whatever it knows how to do. No, there's a time for it. It would vary, but finding the time judiciously to be able to support, and it may be right there when the ambulance people are coming, that there may be some, I've done this, some simple words that I would use that would support what we're trying to do in the moment that the nervous systems experience ultimate unsafety, the risk of death at this particular point. They're terrified. We need to be there to help contain that and to bring safety in. So I may use some everyday anodyne words just to be, I'm here, I'm right here with you. Connection. I'm making connection. Yeah, I'm here. Okay, it's okay. Don't worry. Paramedics arriving. We're all right. Okay. I also do something called trauma first aid when I work in in emergency situations. That's a little bit different. It's a little different technology, but that's more for trauma first aid. And then over time, now, most of our, what we might call would-be trauma, we resolve. We resolve because we have the capacity, the resilience to be able to digest and transform them. After the shock, our system's able then to self-regulate. So if that's happened, you don't need to do trauma therapy, yeah? If the symptoms stay and persist, then you've got PTSD, persist over time. Yeah, that's really what SE is oriented doing, is it's about the symptoms, is we're going to look to attenuate those symptoms and to re-regulate the nervous system. So it's very much case dependent upon how soon you would intervene and how you would intervene. It's often not so much what you do, but how you do it. Your tone of voice, your movements, your invitations, all those things can be resolving of trauma, or unraveling of trauma. Yeah? So I haven't given you a clear-cut answer to that, but I'm saying it can spread out over, depending upon time and place, over a spectrum is what is relevant at this particular time. Is that, hopefully, that will help answer that question.
Okay, thanks very much. That's fascinating. The next question is from Louise. And Louise has asked, the definitions of trauma by Freud and Levine remind me of the symptoms of severe depression. What are they, and what comes first? Can each be experienced independently?
Can each be experienced independently? I wasn't quite clear about that. Let me just address the generality of the question. Yeah, when I showed you that, the graph, putting my hand here with the window of resilience, and down in the bottom right-hand corner on that hypoarousal side, when the parasympathetic nervous system has just shut everything down, is that state may be what we call depression. Now, depression is not my expertise, some of you maybe are, is a very broad, what would you say, a gamut of underlying reasons, but the state of it is in that shutdown state is Neil, just read me the first part of the question so I can answer it more specifically. Are you there?
So the first part of the question, is the definitions of trauma by Freud and Levine remind me of the symptoms of severe depression and anxiety.
Well, yeah, and okay.
And what comes first?
Depression and anxiety. What comes first? Okay, you mean out of anxiety and depression? I would say most likely the anxiety is a hyper-aroused state, yeah? And then the shutdown, look how much energy is used up in anxiety, yeah? In hypervigilance, in revving my motors in sympathetic, adrenalized action, enormous amounts of energy are used up that in actual fact we could be using for something more creative. But if you hold that energy of anxiety for a long period of time, I'm just feeling my belly right now, I'm just feeling my muscles, for a long period of time, you will erode the capacity to hold it, and it then shuts down. I would say that most likely the pathway is to go up, and then to shut down into depression, to mask those symptoms, to hold it down. You see, in that hypo-aroused state, even though that latent energy is still there, it's using much less energy. So it's an adaptive process on one level, but it's maladaptive, is that it cuts us off from being in the flow and the stream of life with all its, with all its joys and its heartbreaks and everything else, is that we get stuck down into that colorless, like the lights have gone off. Yeah? So, and our systems can move from the stuck down into shooting up into anxiety, hypervigilance, and back down again. Yeah. But we're going to be looking either way to start to, not a very nice way to put it, just to bleed off some of that too much energy in the system in order that it can safely be reintegrated into the life stream of the energy. It's manageable. That's what we're making it manageable. Is that okay?
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, great answer. The next question is from Olga. And Olga asks, in SE terms, what would be the best way of supporting a recovery the first few days after quitting?
I'm really sorry, Neil, you cut out at the completely important time. All your times are important, but could you read it again to me? You cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, cool. So in SE terms, what would be the best way of supporting a recovering addict in
You cut out again. And now how I heard it in SE terms, what would be the best way of supporting a recovering addict? Okay, I think that would depend upon whether I were their therapist or their friend or whatever else it would be. Addiction, you see, I think, and this is just my way of seeing it, that the symptoms of PTSD are a bit like an addiction. You don't want to have them, but they keep coming back. Now, that the alcoholic or the cocaine addict or the whatever it would be, it's a pattern that installs itself in the nervous system. It was there for a reason at one time, and quite likely that whatever the addiction was a resource at its onset. So my little glass, this is actually tea of French wine, is perfectly possible, but when it becomes a bottle at breakfast, 2 bottles at lunch, and 3 in the evening time, then I've got a problem. But what was missing was the working with addictions. But in the SE community, we have people who do specialize in working with addictions. And I wish this was a resource because I could indicate a little bit more to people who specialize in this. My theme is that I can understand and express the generalities of SE, which are applicable everywhere to every nervous. And then there are the special traits, the special subjects, and addictions is one of them. That I would say is, what is the missing resource? What is the missing resource? Now, clearly, we want to be able to support people that the resource that's now become the addiction, whether it's behavioral or whether it's substance addiction, was destroying their life and not giving them why they originally developed the defense modality. So what is that missing resource? And it can be in just teasing it out. We may think we know, but often we really don't know. I mean, so much of that, early childhood, before the age of 3, before the hippocampus is fully matured, we don't remember too much. Some stuff we do, but we don't remember too much. And so much trauma that shows up in my office has come from very early childhood, when it was relational. Yeah. So there's that side too. So for those of you, I'm sure we've got lots of clinicians too, but let's just keep it on a more general sense, is what is the missing resource here? And how can we support that person in starting to orient away from the addiction, which is often societally condoned or socially condoned, because that's what we do, we all do it together, into moving into finding the resource. Is what is pleasurable, what is digestible, what helps me to flourish. And sometimes it's the tiniest of things. In SE, tiny is important. Remember, too much, too soon, too fast. So coming in with the heavy guns can be too much for that resilience to hold. Just introduce one small thing, support the person to find one small thing that can start to flourish the nervous system. Instead of the starvation, it was looking for something it couldn't find. And I mention that because that's something that we have addressed in this very short presentation, is the use of resource, which is, I think, really important. I just say for that, just suggestion, notice when you're with your friends, how much time is spent on actually more on the trauma side, on the difficulty and the politics, and the, oh my gosh, let's go, Wait a minute, how about if we allowed in some grains of the opposite? Yeah. Notice what happened. Notice what happens. Yep.
Okay,
So
very interesting.
resource, just that's one of them. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the next question is from Alexandra. And Alexandra asks, when you have managed to ground, mobilize your body, have become good at introspection and regained your ability to others, still ruminating and experiencing periodic flashbacks, what's going on and what do you recommend doing in that situation?
Oh, you're getting me into some really complex stuff here. Thank you. Okay. All right. And you did cut out a little bit, Neil, so excuse me if I missed a little bit of that too. Talking about, yeah. So you're great. You've got your, you're doing your practices, you're doing your resources, you're getting pretty regulated. Working with somebody like that right now, actually. And yet suddenly there's a flashback and you're there and it feels that all the good work that you've done is just being dismantled. No, it hasn't. But how we would work with that. Now, with working with flashbacks, I'd want to work with somebody over a period of time so that their nervous system, it sounds like yours, is it Alexandra? Is it Alexandra, yeah? That you have stabilized your nervous system in so many ways, and then these things come up. So you've already learned how to do the regulation piece, back and forth a little to create the regulation. But then what I'd want to do is I'd want to explore, is there some kind of event or trigger circumstance in which the flashback is likely to happen? Maybe, maybe not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to slow everything down. One of the reasons, and other reasons that I love SE, is that I'm an adrenalized speed queen. And the slowdown is so good for me and the world and my relationships and everything else. So I slow down the whole process, and I might lead somebody into the last experience of a flashback. Now, sometimes these happen when they're sleeping. It doesn't matter. Then I'll give protocols for how you can move into sleep. That we're stretching it out, that the body can have more information. When we go slowly, we can notice more. Yeah? You could smell, slow down and smell the coffee. Yeah? You can notice more. And we start to open out that somewhere down there is a trigger that we weren't able to establish that is causing the flashback into something that happened 2 weeks, 2 years, 20, 60, 80 years ago. So we're going to open it out to give ourselves and the body more information that can come to light, keeping always in safety, that we can then work with that piece in the same way that you've worked with settling your nervous system, okay? We do the same thing if we're going into working with somebody that's had a car accident. You're going to stretch out, but you don't do that to start with, because it's very easy to overwhelm people's nervous systems when you start going, okay, somebody's come to you and they've had a terrible car accident and they can't get back into the car. Well, they've been all sorts of places. People have asked them to tell them about the car accident, which they've done, but they've still got the problem. Well, when you tell the story, you relive it, right? The nervous system, imagination is real for the nervous system. So we want to use that in a positive way. So we're going to open it out, stretch it out, and take it little bit by little bit in order that the body can assimilate the information in a calm and healthy way and then integrate it into the life stream. Did that help?
Okay, that's a great answer again, Giselle. Thank you very much. And we've probably got time for one or two more. The next one, what can you say about attachment-induced trauma, which reactivates as transference during therapy?
How long do you have?
We've got about... Good luck.
And again, I feel that I'm stepping way beyond the scope of a mini introduction to SE. I would say with heartfelt whatever that the attachment wound is more pernicious than sexual and physical trauma is devastating, but the attachment wound can go deeper and take longer to heal. And the problem with an attachment disorder is many people with that are inclined to pick malattuned relationships because that's another part of trauma. We're always looking to try and find a victory over the initial circumstances, which puts people with an attachment disorder often choosing relationships that may be suboptimum for their attachment problem. So it's a long process, requires such trust in the therapist, and safety. This is not short-term naturalistic. It's naturalistic, but it's not short-term therapy. And building up on the resources outside, there's a huge amount of that is the boundary ruptures that have happened. Can we say no to the current relationships that we're in that keep aggravating the attachment disorder? Can we say yes and move towards that which we want? It's the whole 3-year, the tools and the processes of SE that the attachment, that this question really sits in. So it's usually a much longer term process.
Okay, well, I think you've done a good job of answering that in the time allowed.
Well,
We're still got time for this session.
And I feel
Sorry.
a personal frustration. I feel a personal frustration just because they're such truncated and based that I've given you really just so little information to base my responses on. But may I have time to thank everybody, Neil?
You've done an amazing job, Giselle. Sorry, there's a bad connection here, so there's a bit of breakup between what I'm hearing and what I'm saying as well. But no, it's okay. It's been so much taking the time. Is there anywhere you'd recommend people to go now, just as a follow-up? Any websites or anything where they can learn more about your work or learn more about the workshops and stuff?
Yeah, and when we send them out, questions and answers, there's a little thing here. Come on, technology. Do get in touch with us. We're a tiny organization, but we're very person-oriented. So my lovely assistant, Dawn, you can get in touch with. Look at the website. It'll have information on our programs. And please hear what I say underneath when I put in, and really thank you for caring. And maybe we could just right now, just come back to that big circle of all of us, connected wherever we are in the world, wherever you are, that we can feel those however many people that are here today, that invisibly or otherwise, that we're all in this together and we're all connected. And thank you. Any help we can do, let us know.
100%.
Okay, and Neil, big thank you to you. Really appreciate it.